Hi, this is Michelle Hill here from DisruptED TV Teacher Sparks, and I am joined by Olivia Winters from Bexley, Ohio, which is a suburb of Columbus, Ohio. Welcome, Olivia.
Thank you.
So Olivia is a brand new teacher, and this is something that I'm really, really passionate about, which is helping young teachers find their way into really, really great success. And so tell us a little bit about your first teaching assignment.
Okay, well, I teach special ed preschool in a local school district here, like in another Columbus suburb called Canal, Winchester. And it's like half special ed students, half regular ed. It's kind of like preschool for everyone, but also an inclusion program.
So do you love it?
I love it. It's so fun. It's so high energy.
Yeah. You must have a lot of energy to not only deal with preschoolers, but then to navigate the special ed world as well. So today we're going to have a discussion that what I wish I knew before I got started with teaching. And we're going to talk about some of the issues that you have, not about just in the classroom, but also navigating the entire teacher profession. So I know that you and I talked off camera for a little bit, and we were talking about some of the things that you wish you knew. And your biggest one was that there are so many obligations and so many other things that go along with the career that you weren't aware of. So tell me a couple of the things that you struggled with.
Well, I think actually the first big thing where it was kind of a wake-up call that I struggled with was how to put in like an absence of one day. Like my mom had surgery and everything was fine, but I needed to be out for half of the day to like go be with her. And I had just mentioned it to one of my like administrators, and she was just like, "Oh, you put that in ASAP, right?" Which is the system we use. And I was like, "What?" And she's like, "Oh, and you talked to the principal, right? Like you're all good, right?" And I was like, no. And it was like the end of the day, and I was like in the principal's office with tears because I was like, I had no idea. Like I had no idea I had to do that. So that was like the first thing.
And one of the things that I also mentioned to you was that it doesn't matter that you are a young beginning teacher, but anybody starting a new career or a new profession or in a new workplace, there's procedures that we're unaware of. So probably it would be great if your district had a checklist, a handy checklist that they could offer you guys, or even a Google slideshow that would say, if this situation occurs, this is the step or this is the procedure, because you could go back to that resource. In the meantime, sure. I think that, have you been paired up with somebody as a mentor?
Yeah, and that was another thing I was thinking about. I do have a mentor she's really helpful, really nice, but she's not in my grade level. And the preschool I work in is part of the it's also part of the K-12 buildings. But we have like kind of our own, in a lot of ways, our own curriculum and our own system. So like sometimes I do the things that the rest of the school does and sometimes I don't. And so a lot of times the mentor is like, I don't even know if preschool has to do this or what you guys have to do, but here's what we do. And I'm like, okay. So also like, why is my mentor not my grade level? I don't know.
So if we're talking to school administrators out there, you need to pair up your mentors and mentees better so that they are at least accessible to one another and understand the design, because I've been in buildings where we've done that as well, that the mentor was in history and the mentee is in math and totally different subject area, so it's kind of hard. One of the great things that I love that you're doing right now is building a PLN, professional learning network, because that's where I have found so many helpful ways to navigate things that I might be unaware of, that somebody within my own district might not know about, but other people have experience. So keep building that professional network, because that will be really helpful. So I get the procedures are really tough. How about all of the pedagogy and the professional development? How's that going for you?
Yeah, so I ran into kind of another situation where it was like, there was an email sent out or whatever, and it was like, just a reminder, your professional growth plan is due next week. And I'm like, what is a professional growth plan? Or we have these other things called student learning objectives. It's like a big thing. And I was like, I don't know how to write that or what even goes in that. And nobody had mentioned it to me until I started asking, like, hey, wait, what is this? And people are like, oh, you didn't know? Like, that's due next week. You better get on that. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, well, SGOs are amazingly important, as well as professional growth plans for yourself. But
Yeah.
verbiage can be really, really kind of tricky, or you're not really sure how to phrase it. And they're so important because they do affect our evaluations as teachers. So you want to make sure that your target scores and all of that information is correct. So that would be another great thing for anybody who's brand new to teaching, to know the acronyms, the common acronyms, and how great that would be to have a cheat sheet on what those acronyms are and what they are and how to navigate them so that you're doing them correctly. So I think that is another great suggestion.
Yeah, so add that to the checklist. That needs to be on the checklist. Also in special ed, I've never written a whole IEP all by myself, and it kind of was just like
overwhelming.
Yeah, I'm in the process of writing it, and every time I write a section, I like ask 3 people, like, does this sound right? Like, what are these goals? They sound like okay. And that's like one of the things we had mentioned before is a lot of my people who are just trying to be helpful to me, but they say a lot of like, don't worry, we're going to ease you into this. But I took that as like, oh, well then, all right, I'm just going to relax until you tell me that I need to do something. But then it turned into, oh, like I had that responsibility the whole time. They were just trying to help me feel better. But then it's like, now I'm extra overwhelmed because I'm behind.
Right.
That was one of the things, is like, I had someone come in my room and was like, you're sending out these reminders for meetings, right? And I was like, what? No.
It's funny because that's kind of that thing where your boss comes in and says, listen, I need these done. No hurry, but can you have them tomorrow at 8 a.m. on my desk,
Yeah. Yeah. And I was like, okay.
So it's really important as a new teacher. One of the best words of advice I could give you is really buddy yourself up with somebody who may not be considered your mentor, but somebody who knows the world that you live in and has very similar time restrictions, as well as professional obligations that you need to meet, and check with them often, like kind of buddy them up and have lunch with them. And you'll get to a point where that person may not be the person that you want to spend all your free time with, but at least for the first 6 months, until you really get the lay of the land and you understand what is asked of you and you're familiar with all of these procedures and these acronyms, that you have someone who can kind of guide you. So I would give that word of advice to any new teacher starting, whether they're young novice teachers like yourself or a veteran teacher who's just changing a new workplace, because every place has a different design system.
Yeah.
So, and then the other part is that what are the expectations from someone like you as to the reality of what teaching really is? Did you find those to be in conflict? We're talking about some of the things that you didn't expect because you don't know what you don't know, you haven't had that experience.
Oh, yeah.
But, have you found that there are things that maybe that you were taught at the university level that they explained it and you're like, that is not reality based at all?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's more in the, like, my day to day. I'm like, I'm not even sure if I'm even teaching the right thing, or like when I'm writing lessons and it's like all me, like on me, I'm like, do I need to be like asking someone? Am I like making sure that I'm like including all of the stuff I need to? And I don't know. It just seemed easier when I was in school than now that I'm here. I'm like, it's like in the adjustment of like, I'm allowed to do whatever I want, but also now I have the responsibility to make sure my kids are getting all that they need.
It's a big responsibility.
Yeah, I feel the weight of that a lot.
Yeah, and you also start to think, am I even qualified to do this?
Yes, I think that all the time. Like, wait.
So one of the things I'll tell you is that that's a normal feeling, because we all felt that way when we first started. A, am I qualified? B, do I know what I'm doing enough? C, am I doing it well enough? Those are all the things that go through our heads. And D, could I have a little help, please? So
Yeah, that's a good one.
you know, those are things that that every brand new teacher struggles with. And so I would think that that you need to give yourself a break and understand that your first year, your first 2-3 years really are getting your feet wet and starting. You're not going to be the absolute best version of your teacher self yet. You're learning, you're growing, and you need to give yourself a break. It's kind of like riding a bike. When you first got on the bike, you know, you rode it, but it was shaky and you were off balance a little bit. And then as you rode it longer, it got a whole lot easier. And then it was intuitive. It just happened. So give yourself a break. That's going to happen. Absolutely. So I also think that whenever you can have conversations with people who say those things to you, who are your biggest supporters, that say to you, you're doing the best you can with all of the things that you have, give yourself a break and just keep reaching for the stars, and you'll eventually get there. So you're doing, I'm sure you're doing a great job. You're giving it 100%. How about, you know, in terms of the classroom, is there anything that you're struggling with in the classroom?
I don't know. I think the biggest thing is really like in preschool, everything happens in really short amount of time. And then if I don't get stuff done, I'm like right now I'm doing some like assessments, you know, so like later I can, you know, classic pre-assessment kind of stuff, but there's like no time, and I'm running into like some of the students I have are very high needs, and I never assess, and it's been like a week past when I really should have had it done. And it's just like
time management is a big deal. So, yeah, absolutely is. I think until you get your routines and your transitions down, you're going to feel like you're always running from one activity to another, whether it is a physical activity or whether it is something that you need to do, you know, with your pedagogy, lesson plans, grading things, etc. Feels like you're overwhelmed with the amount of activities. And eventually what happens is that as a veteran teacher, you start to learn to work smarter, not harder, and you start to be able to combine things, or you look for some shortcuts that are allowed to make life a little bit easy. You learn to not have to grade everything because you have a pulse on your kids and you really know what they can do. And some of it is practice that you want them to have, and you don't have to substantiate that with a grade, so then you don't have to put it in the grade book. So there are different things that will happen as you go, and it's just going to be a matter of practicing. I always remember worrying about, will I have enough material in the class to fill the amount of time?
Yeah.
Something that you have as well, or?
Oh yeah. And you know, at my grade level, we do a circle time, and seriously, I have changed circle time like every day, because I'm like, it's like too much. The kids aren't liking it, or we didn't do enough, or like, am I even hitting it? And I just like don't feel like I know what I'm supposed to do yet for that. I'm like still, but in the meantime, you know, my kids are just doing something every day that's like kind of different, and it's like, oh man, I don't know.
So that's going to pose a big problem for you, because kids need routines, and they need consistent routines. So you've got to find what works for you and for the students. And so if that means that you need to call on a professional that, you know, one of your veteran teachers or even your supervisor or principal, say, hey, listen, I'm struggling with the transition, or I'm struggling with the routine. Can you come in and observe what I'm doing and tell me what's good about it and what's not, so that then we can perfect this, so that I can get into a very good routine for my students and for myself, so that we are all on the same page as to what to expect. Because as I said, students, especially that young, really do need set routines. They need to know that after circle time comes this, or in circle time, somebody's going to do the date and weather. So you need to develop those strategies and that routine that's predictable for students. And that's one of the things where, again, as a new teacher, this is trial and error. So I had a new teacher a couple of years ago, and at the high school level, and she said to me one of the biggest complaints she had was that everybody who came in to supervise her or to observe her had a different suggestion. And she would try it out, and she said, and they told me to give it time, so I gave it 2 or 3 weeks to find that it didn't work. So I lost 2 or 3 weeks of a strategy. And I said to her, whoa, let's stop there. Did they really tell you to do that? And she's like, yes. I said, well, you pretty much, you can tell in a couple of times whether it's going to work or not. So 4 or 5 times that you've done something, if it's not working, you need to stop and you need to consult and you need to try something new. And she did develop some of those things. And she also learned, I guess, who was giving advice that was really, really workable advice and who was giving the fluff advice that sounded good. So she found what I call that sweet spot as well with her students and with her routine. So good to say that she's off to a much better year these past 2 years. She's had a phenomenal year. So we'll get there as well.
Hopefully.
So
That's the goal.
it is a goal. The biggest thing for